Hi, welcome to the bathtub, or as we like to think of it now, the Dodo-free bathtub. I moved Dodo into the guest room, and she's quite happy in there. So don't worry about Dodo. But she's quite happy in there, and she's a little less obstreperous, and she's got lots of mirrors around her. And I moved all her. She's playing around in that room, having a good time, and not driving us crazy. Lucky's downstairs, hiding under the table, trying to decide if she wants to attack us or get petted. She hasn't quite. Sometimes she doesn't know. She's not entirely sure. Anyway, this is we're going to do an episode here of what we've been talking about. We've been doing this for about a few years now. It's called 1001 Nights, I think. It's called 1001 Nights in the Bathtub with John Barth. I've been reading through this wonderful 3-volume edition of the complete Arabian Nights, which was edited, I think was it Robert Irwin was one of the people behind it, translated by Malcolm C. Lyons and Ursula Lyons. There's 3 volumes. I'm about halfway through the 3rd one now. I think we talked about this already. And the gimmick was I was going to read through the 1001 Nights and then read John Barth's books in sequence. So we've been kind of doing a million things. And John Barth just recently passed. He died about a few months ago, at a ripe old age. He had a good life. And I decided I was going to go. The next book on my list was to read or reread CHIMERA. And CHIMERA is one of my favorite Barth novels. And I've had different. I have mixed opinions about all of Barth's novels. I'll try to talk about them today. But I went back to reread this. I'll tell you my adventures in rereading that in a few minutes. But first of all, I want to reiterate what I've mentioned previously. Is for some unknown, unforeseeable reason, unknown reason that we can't even comprehend, we almost have 5,000 subscribers. And it's just like last few days, I don't know, they must think I'm giving away free food or something. There's just all sorts of people who have been joining. I don't know why that is. Maybe it's because Dodo stopped chirping so damn loud. But anyway, we're going to be very close to it. I think we'll probably have, in another week or two, we'll probably have the 5,000 subscribers. And we want to do a special, we always do some sort of a weird episode. And I think basically it'll just be an informal cocktail party. So we'll ask everybody to bring a cocktail. Again, we don't drink cocktails during the filming of these anymore. Just pure spring mountain water and no pixels. Everything's unpixelated. But on that day, we'll have a kind of open cocktail party where everyone can chat. I don't think I'll have voices because it'll be too confusing. But we'll do what we did last time, which was a live chat session. And we can just talk about whatever you want to. So that'll be the plan. I'll give more information on that when we get closer. Okay? So, first of all, as I said, if you want to have a great summer, these are wonderful stories. It's just 1001 Nights are just great fun. And it's a direct influence on much of Barth's work, but particularly CHIMERA. This is it's basically 3 novellas. The CHIMERA is a Greek monster that's made up of 3 things. It's a lion's, I can't remember now. It's a lion's body, and I forget what the head is, and the tail's a snake. Anyway, look it up on Wikipedia. It's three different animals put together, and this is 3 novellas, which actually kind of get tied up in a big, complex metafictional web by the network by the end, which I probably bailed out. I probably didn't follow that closely. I kind of lost some of the threads near the end, but it starts off great. It starts off with a wonderful story, which is a very good introduction to Barth, which is called the Dunyazadiad. Okay, instead of the Scheherazadiad or whatever. Scheherazade, there's 2 sisters in the Arabian Nights who tell the story or frame the story, and the framing narrative of the 1001 Nights is that 2 brothers. Feel free to correct me when I'm wrong here, because I don't remember all this stuff. I'm rereading, and I'm going to make a lot of mistakes probably. So feel free to make corrections when you see them here on the little chat thing below the video. There's 2 brothers. They're 2 kings of some place, and they come home and find their wives cheating on them, who they loved, and they decide to go off and make sure no woman can cheat on them anymore. They go to village after village, and they make the villagers give them, the local kings or viziers or whatever, turn over their most beautiful virgin daughter. They sleep with her, and then they kill her so she can't cheat on them. This is these 2 horrible men who are the center of the story. And they come to this town where the vizier is the father of Scheherazade, and he turns over his daughter Scheherazade to go sleep with this king. The two brothers go off in two different directions. You see, it's already complicated. And Scheherazade goes with the one king, and she goes to bed with him. And her plan is they connect sex and storytelling is all interconnected in every one of these stories and in a lot of Barth's meta narratives. She sleeps with him, has sex with him in like a million different positions, and she's supposed to be a virgin. And then she says, okay, before you kill me, I want to tell you a story. And she starts telling the Arabian Nights. And she tells the first story, and she ends in the middle of a story. And that's the trick, is every story ends in the middle. And then the next night, the king has to keep her alive to hear the end of the story. He has sex with her again. She tells another story. She ends that in the middle. So it's 1,001 nights of basically diversion and delay and postponement of this murder of Scheherazade. While Scheherazade is telling the story, her sister Dunyazad or whatever her name was, her sister sits at the foot of the bed watching them have sex and listens to the stories. Okay, there you have it. Now I just want to give you really quickly what happens in Barth all the time is he makes you try to figure out how the story's being told. And that's the gimmick between each one of these stories. For example, this story starts off with Dunyazad. I should probably remember her damn name. Dunyazad and the kid sister, as they refer to her in this. And Dunyazad is telling the story from her point of view. She doesn't really speak in the 1,001 Nights. But as this story, it starts with her telling somebody the story of what's been going on. And in the course of her telling that story, you don't realize till you're well into this. You have to read all these stories at least once or twice. She's telling the story to the other king, the king who went off to murder women in another village and rape virgins and all this stuff. And as we learn, she's married to this other king. And she and Scheherazade have already finished the 1,001 Nights. Scheherazade has gone off to wed her husband, and Dunyazad has been promised to marry this guy, this other king, these two evil men who run around. I don't want to try to give you any more of the story. Anyway, but you don't know who she's telling the story to and how the story is being told. And that's really what the game of the fictional game of each one of these stories is. The first one is you can pretty much follow it. You do really need to kind of maybe look at Wikipedia, brush up on the frame narrative of 1,001 Nights, and you need to do that with each one of these stories. But the first one's a wonderful story in the course of which John Barth shows up as a wizard from the future coming back to see his heroine, Scheherazade. And he's telling her the stories that he's read in 1,001 Nights so that Scheherazade could tell the stories to her king, etc. The network of narratives get more and more complicated. I won't tell you what happens at the end of the story or what the central situation is, because the situation of Dunyazad speaking to this man who you don't really see until the end of the story is important. Now, this is followed by a story about Perseus. It's the retelling of the Perseus myth. And Perseus is the guy who he frees Andromeda from the rock, and when a sea serpent is coming to get her, and he's the one that goes off for various reasons to kill the Gorgon, the Medusa with the snakes in her hair who freezes everybody into stone. It's a very complicated, the second story starts to get pretty complicated, but I thought I would just read you a little passage just to give you an idea of how Barth kind of takes these mythic characters and makes them kind of modern comic narrative characters. And they all live in a university, like in Giles Goatbar. They all live in universities, this giant university. Anyway, this is a brief bit of Perseus telling his story. And he's telling his story to somebody, too, who you don't know who he's telling the story to till the end of the novella. You saw how it was, I said. The kids were grown and restless. Andromeda and I had become different people. Our marriage was on the rocks. The kingdom took care of itself. My fame was sure enough, but I'd lost my shine with my golden locks. He's telling this as a middle-aged hero. 20 years it was since I'd headed Medusa. I was 20 kilos overweight and bored stiff. With half a life to go, I felt fettered and coffered as ever by Denia's womb, the brass-bound chest, Polydectes' tasks. These are all elements from the old myth. In fact, please keep your face straight. I became convinced I was petrifying. He's the idea that he's freezing up, like Medusa used to freeze people when he would hold her head in front of them. And asked my doctor if it mightn't be the late effects of radiation from Medusa. Just aging of the old joints, the fool declared correctly. Told me to forget about the Gorgon, give up ouzo, get more exercise, but hare hunts can't hold a candle to monster Mackie. So he's just shooting rabbits now instead of monsters. I stayed up too late, drank too many, traded shameless on my authority to bore each night a captive audience with the story of my life. Change of scene, then, the doctor ordered. Bit of a sea trip. Do you oodles? He even winked. Take the missus along. Second honeymoon, etc. Anyway, those are the parts of Barth's books that always kind of really liven up and really get quite interesting. So anyway, I don't want to tell too much more about the Perseid and how this story changes. But what I did find when I was reading these, and this is my feeling about Barth, is when you get into his stories, when they're the less narratively complicated, I can get through the Dunyazad. The Perseid, both times I read this book, I stopped almost near the end, or I got to the end and I actually didn't know where I was. At the end of it, it's kind of a cool ending. We have a progress in the novellas from a book to tablets of stone, because he's watching these tablets of stone that have been carved to tell his story, and he's also part of this night sky, because these are all constellations of the sky. So we go from the stone, we go from the book of the 1001 Nights to the stone of the telling of the story and the stars, and finally in the third novella, which is called the Bellerophoniad, about the Greek hero Bellerophon. It goes into these tides, the tide waters, particularly around the tidewater tales of what occur in later Barth novels. So I don't want to, like I said, I'm going to stop now really in a way because I don't want to over confuse you. But I did find that when I got through the Perseid, I had to go back and read it again, and I actually really enjoyed the Perseid the second time I read it in about a week because I lost the thread. When I got into the Bellerophoniad, I felt the same way, but I really kind of got lost. There's so many narrative stories in that, and the central conceit seems to be that Bellerophon he is the manuscript that has been written down. And there's also the notion that this manuscript that's been written down has been disgorged by a computer in John Barth's university. That's basically the gimmick of it. And it's talked about like it's basically discussed as an AI novel, right? Because at one point he talks about how this John Barth comes back again into the third story, and he talks about how they're creating a lot of these stories through the supercomputer, which shows up in Charles Gotboy as well. Just very briefly, I'll read a bit of this. It says here, Bray, there's John, I think it's John Bray, anyways, John Barth, JB. He used the Tidewater Foundation grant, so he gets a grant from his university, to reconstruct his machine in such a way that once a number of works by a particular author were fed into it, it could compose hypothetical new works in the author's manner. So this book is sort of being written by a computer into which all of John Barth's previous books have been fed. And then about that point, I started to get a little lost. And once he starts doing this, he does this sometimes too. There's a huge chart. There's a big chart in here, and there's also a whole description of different tides, the tide waters, and when they arrive, and what they do, and which direction they go. And I guess I couldn't keep up with a lot of that stuff. So I think probably I will have to reread the Bellerophoniad again. I might enjoy it as much as I enjoyed most of this book, but I got a little lost. All right, and so the premise was we were always going to do this and then work our way up to letters. The John Barth character in this is writing a book called Numbers. It's almost like an introduction to this big, complicated novel, which I have not managed to break into yet. I don't know whether I'm going to get there. Honestly, I don't know. But I'm going to try to get back to Chimera. If I do read it again, I might give you an update. But he is a very peculiar and fascinating and fun writer a lot of the times. and sometimes it just takes you. It just gets so tied up in so many narrative knots. I just kind of lose patience sometimes. All right, that's my entire take on Chimera. Big fans of John Barth. Sorry to see him go, but you know what can you do? He did his best. He had a good life, and he wrote a lot of good books. Stay safe. Get ready for 5,000 subscribers, and we will paint the interweb red. All right.